This would be the fifth time already. Let's review where we are and how we got here. And, I think today will be the last time we'll be doing this.
Asking ourselves that question.
Okay, so recall we started off in the beginning of the Masechta with a very interesting, footnote to Gittin, which is that anyone who brings any messenger needs to say the words "b'fanei nechtav" or "b'fanei nechtam." What's the reason for this decree? There are two reasons. Rabbi says l'fishein v'kiyin l'shma. Rava says l'fishein edem etzim l'kaimai. Right? Rabbi says the reason is because they're not familiar with the law of l'shma, that a divorce needs to be written specifically for the man and woman involved. And Rava says because the witnesses have to be available to verify the document, notarize it effectively. That would be edem etzim l'kaimai kiyum shtaros. Yesterday, in really Shabbos, we saw that Rabba Islay de Rava, that Rabba actually agrees with Rava. In other words, Rabba has two requirements. According to Rabba, there are two reasons why b'fanei nechtav is said. Number one, l'shma, and number two, l'kaimai, mitzuyin l'kaimai. However, according to Rava, the only reason is mitzuyin l'kaimai. Not only that, we also found out that according to Rabba, at some point in time, everybody learned the rules. And therefore, it was not necessary to say b'fanei nechtav, but rabbinically, they still required it because maybe people will forget. But in many situations, they were lenient, and they said that if it wasn't said, or if the person couldn't have said it, then it is acceptable as well. Okay, one more side point I should have mentioned earlier. It's very likely I won't be here tomorrow, so it'll take me over. I'm not 100% sure, but don't be surprised if it happens. Okay, fine. So we are at the top of Vav Mid Aleph. We're in the middle of so what does b'fanei nechtav or b'fanei nechtav mean? B'fanei nechtav means I saw the writing of the document. B'fanei nechtav means I saw the signing of the document. How much of the document do you actually have to see? So the Gemara yesterday says one line is enough, even if it wasn't one line. It was he just heard the sound of the scribe scratching. That's sufficient. Okay. Tiny Kav said Rav Ashi. That was the opinion of Rav Ashi. Hearing the scratching is enough. The Brisa says maybe get Medina Siyam. If somebody brings a divorce from outside of Israel, even if he's in the house and the scribe is in the attic, or the opposite, he's in the attic, the sefer is in the bottom floor. Kosher. Even if he's not in the house, but he's going in and out, it's also kosher. If he's in the house and the scribe is in the attic, Gemara says he didn't actually see it. It must be. He heard the scratching of the pen, what do they call it? The quill and the cloth, the parchment. Okay, and this is clearly a proof to the opinion of Rav Ashi. Amar Mara, we see that we just quoted, even if he enters and leaves the whole day, that's sufficient. Who are we talking to? Who are we talking about? We're talking about the messenger. So the Gemara says, if he is in the bottom floor and the sefer is in the attic, he hasn't even seen the sefer, and yet that suffices for the requirement that that he see, quote unquote, because he doesn't actually see it, but he can make a statement that he saw the writing. So nichnas v'yotzi, if he actually saw the writing because he was walking in and out of the room, for sure that is included in being able to make the statement that I saw it being written. Okay, fine. So it must be we're not talking about the shliach, ela sefer. We're talking about the scribe. So what happened here? The scribe is walking in and out. So the Gemara says pshita, that would seem to be obvious. Is it because he's going in and out that we should invalidate the document? In other words, who cares? She's going in and out. But so in other words, he was going in and out of the room and writing. And in the course of the time, he happened to go to the marketplace. So what's the concern here? I would have thought he found somebody else in the market who has the same names, but Amr Lay, and he said to him to write a divorce, and he's taking this divorce and writing it for somebody else. That's not, we're not worried about such a possibility. Okay. So until now, we saw the sort of the basic framework for writing, for saying b'fanei nechtam was Eretz Yisrael, Israel versus everybody else. And of course, we had some questions. Why? What happens if they're both in the same area? According to Rav, why is this necessary? And we said that it could be there's borders in between towns, or even inside of towns. There's another point here. Itmar, we learned Bavel, the city of the area of Bavel, Babylonia. Rav says Eretz Yisrael Gittin. Rav says that Bavel is like Eretz Yisrael with regard to divorces. Shmuel says it's like outside of Israel. Okay, what's the reasoning? Let's say this is the reasoning. One says that the reason is because they don't know the rules of Lishma. That's why b'fanei nechtam was enacted in the first place. But Bavel, they learned it. They know the rules. They have a lot of Torah scholars there, and therefore they know the rules, and therefore there's no need to say b'fanei nechtam. Umar Savra, the other opinion is because the witnesses are not readily available to notarize the document. Presumably, it is the case that in Bavel, it's not easy to find witnesses that live out of town to verify an out-of-town signature. Umar says, "V'tizbra, is this logical? Or Rabba is to the Rava." We already pointed out that Rabba agrees in principle to Rava. In other words, Rabba has two requirements from b'fanei nechtam. Number one, Bekiyin Lishma. Number two, Mitzuyin L'Kaima. He agrees to both statements. So how can this is the debate? So obviously it's the case that everybody agrees that it has to be verified. So what is the debate? Rav says, Rav says because there are a lot of yeshivas, people are coming and going to study Torah. So therefore, it's easy to verify signatures. Shmuel Savar Mesifta B'Yosaya treaty. The people that are studying Torah, they are not familiar with the signatures necessarily, and therefore, it isn't enough to be able to exempt you from b'fanei nechtam. Itmar Nami, we learned as well. Amar of Abba, Amar of Huna. If Abba said in the name of Huna, Asinu Atzeinim B'Bavel Eretz Yisrael Gittin. We have made ourselves in Bavel like Eretz Yisrael is with regard to the rules of Gittin. From the time that Rav came to Bavel. Okay, most of Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Yirmiyah had the following question. Rabbi Yehudah, I remember Rekem Lemizrach, Rekem Kemizrach. Rabbi Yehudah said from Rekem east, and Rekem is the easternmost city. 1 second. Okay, hold on 1 second. Yeah, okay. So basically we've established that there's now at least two authors, Rav Abba in the name of Rav Huna, and also the opinion of Rav, that Eretz Yisrael, that Bavel is like Eretz Yisrael. So hold on, the Mishnah seems to imply otherwise, because if you read the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehudah says in the Mishnah, he defines the borders of Eretz Yisrael. And what do you think? The borders of Eretz Yisrael don't include Bavel. Evidently, the reason for this is because Bavel needs to say b'fanei nechtam. I think we'll go through. Rabbi Yehudah said Rabbi Yehudah is defining what is called Israel that does not say b'fanei nechtam. Rabbi Yehudah says Merekem lemizrach, from the city of Rekem east, Rekem kemizrach, and Rekem is itself excluded. Me Ashkelon l'Darim, Ashkelon south, but Ashkelon itself, Kedarim, is not part of Israel. Obviously Ashkelon is sanctified. We're talking here about the qualifications either for Lishma or for Edom. Me Akko l'Tzafon, Akko l'Tzafon, Akko to the north, and Akko itself is like north. So the Gemara says, Bavel Tzvana Eretz Yisrael Kaima. Bavel is to the north of Israel. Okay, it's not really. It's roughly the same latitudes. There are parts of Bavel that are to the north. Okay, but by and large, Bavel is to the east of Israel. But there are parts of Bavel to the north. The first states, Vayemer Hashem Elai. This is the prophecy of Yirmiyah, and Yirmiyah prophesies that Bavel will strike against Eretz Yisrael. And he says, God said to me, Mitzafan tipatach hara. from the north, the evil will come, and obviously they were conquered by the Babylonian Empire. Which and we learned Rabbi Meir says that Akka is not like the north. Akka is included in Eretz Yisrael. It's north of Akka that would be problematic. But Fila Rabbi Meir like Amar Ela Akka the Meir only said this with regard to Akka because Akka was close. Aval Bavel de Merachka, but Bavel that's at a distance. Loy. Then Bavel obviously is certainly not included in these borders of Israel. So how could you say that Bavel is like Eretz Yisrael when the Mishnah gives a very clear definition of Israel? It took out a map and it drew a couple of dots. You can sort of figure out where Israel is. And what do you think? Bavel's not part of it. So evidently it's the case that Bavel is not included in Eretz Yisrael and therefore is required to say b'fanei nechtam. What's the obvious answer? Except for outside of Bavel. In other words, I'm defining you the borders of Eretz Yisrael, but it could be that Bavel has the same halacha as Eretz Yisrael itself. Okay, Ad Heichen Bavel. Okay, so Bavel's not included in the boundaries of Israel. What are the boundaries of Bavel? So Amar Papa says, "Kamachloikis liyuchsin, kach machloikis Gittin." With regard to the debate of Yuchsin, is the same debate of Gittin. Yuchsin, we'll get to it in a while, about 3.5 months. But the Gemara here is a lengthy equitus of length, I believe it is. The Gemara there is a lengthy discussion how to define Bavel. Okay, but the Gemara says the same debate with regard to Yuchsin. Now, what I'll give a moment of background here. So when during the second Aliyah, you want to call that. So after the little history. The first temple was destroyed. They went out into exile, 70 years. In the course of the exile, I believe it was the 47th or the 48th year, maybe a little bit later than that, King Daryavesh the first, he gave permission for them to rebuild the temple. That permission was withdrawn by Achashverosh. Achashverosh stopped the construction. It was later it was permitted again by the son of Esther, who apparently became king at an extremely young age. So maybe it was Esther herself that was allowing it. I don't know. That's complete conjecture. I have no clue. Okay, so they came up again to build the second temple. It was led that Aliyah was led by Ezra, and we'll see when we discuss there. At that point, there are sort of 10 categories, I believe, right? Hanam, Levim, Yisraelim, Mamzer, and also 5 categories maybe. No, the Gemara says so. It's 10 categories. I don't remember all the exact categories. Regardless, what Ezra did was he took anybody who had questionable lineage and he made him come along with him. At that point, the individual was questionable. Anyone with questionable lineage was removed, was taken with to Israel. He left, and the advantage of this was he left Babel behind. He was basically trying to establish a new center where they could actually rule on the matter and determine what people's lineage status was. Now in Bavel was left clean. In other words, everyone knew what they were. If you were a Mamzer, you knew you were a Mamzer. If you were a Kayan, you knew you were a Kayan. So there was sort of, at that point in Bavel, everyone's Yuchsin was known. So there were no questions in the Yuchsin. Now the question, and what that meant was that for many future generations, there were no Yuchsin questions in Bavel. Nobody ever had a question, where did somebody come from? Because only the people who knew where they came from were left behind. So, okay, so now Bavel obviously is a premier destination if you're looking to marry somebody whose progeny is known, right? You can you know their ancestors. So how do you define that? Exactly which area did Ezra basically determine it was? Everyone who was there knew their lineage. So this debate, and that the same debate with regard to Yuchsin is with regard to Gittin. Rav Yosef Amar Machlokes Yuchsin Avol Gittin Divrei Kol Arba Tinyana Digeshim. It's 1 second. It is the 4th bridge, I believe. I'm sorry. Apparently it's the second border that's close to the bridge.
Second Willow Swamp.
Willow Swamp. It's Rova. Okay, that makes sense. Interesting. Okay, I wrote because I wrote between both. Yeah. Okay. I'll go with that translation. It's probably a better one. Arova is a willow. Okay, so Arova is a willow. So it's the second willow swamp that's next to the bridge. Okay, Rav Chisda Matzrach me aktisfun lebei ardisher. Rav Chisda would require b'fanei nachtav to be said when a divorce was handled from Aktisfun to the town of Bei Ardisher, Bei Ardisher Aktisfun loy matzrach. However, from when a divorce came from Bei Ardisher to Aktisfun, he did not require a divorce. So Gemara says, let's say the reason is because they are not an expert in the area of Lishma. Jared, are you with us?
Yes, I got it.
Okay.
I'm just counting up there
10 lines in the bottom.
on the second willow swamp I just got there.
Okay. Let's say the reason here is because people are not familiar with the laws of Lishma. V'hani Gemiri, and the people from Aktisfun are familiar with the laws of. The people of Bei Ardisher are familiar with the laws of Lishma, and therefore, if they bring the divorce to Bei Ardisher, then you don't have to say b'fanei nachtav. However, when a divorce is brought from Aktisfun to Bei Ardisher, then it does require it. So the Gemara asks the obvious question: it is barav, Rabbi is the Rabbi agrees that b'fanei nachtav is required to fulfill the component of having witnesses who are able to verify. Everyone agrees that the witnesses have to be available to verify the signatures. Okay, so what's going on here? So one of these cities, which was the city of, one second, Aktisfun had market days. So the people of Bei Ardisher would travel to Aktisfun on the market days. Now, the people of you'd imagine the people that are in the what they call the home team, right? It's the people of that would be Aktisfun, right? Yeah, the people of Aktisfun, they are familiar not only with their own, their own signatures, but you can imagine that the home team is probably the possessor of the majority of the documents of the visiting team of Bei Ardisher, because typically Bei Ardisher will be buying sometimes on credit from the people of Aktisfun. So the home team recognizes the visiting team. The visiting team doesn't recognize the home team, even though they come in to visit. They're busy with the market. They're busy, playing the game, whatever it is. You're not looking at the signatures. However, the people that are the home team, they recognize the signatures of the visiting team because they're the ones left holding the pile of documents at the end. So therefore, the home team can verify the visiting team. The visiting team can't verify the home team. Because the people of Ardisher come to visit Aktisfun. The people of Aktisfun recognize Bnei Ardisher. The people of Bnei Ardisher don't recognize Aktisfun. My time, I'm B'Shukayr treaty, because even though the people of Ardisher are visiting, they're busy in the market that day. They're not busy looking at signatures, and presumably they have a lesser quantity of documents. Okay, Rabbi Baravua Matzrach me Arsa la'Arsa. Rabbi Baravua would require b'fanei nachtav even from two rows of houses. It's like in what they call on the hillside here from the east side. In terms of Kesser, the east side and the west side, you require b'fanei nachtav. Not only that, Rav Sheshes Matzrach me shchuna l'shchuna. From Nevada to East 15th to 15th Street. That's what it was. Even from a group of three houses. Rava would require it even from one house to the next. So Gemara says, hold on. Rava is the one who says because witnesses are not available to verify. So what do you mean you can't verify a document from your next door neighbor? Why not? So Gemara says, no, because Rava was the rabbi in the town of Bnei Mechuzah. And in the town of Mechuzah, Shani Bnei Mechuzah denied it. It's like Manhattan, like everyone's, you live in a building and there's new people every day. There's always people coming in and going out. So therefore, nobody recognized each other's signatures, and he required b'fanei nachtav. Even though Mechuzah was also involved, by the way. But it still, Mechuzah apparently was necessary. Rav Chana Mishtoi, Rav Kahana. 1 second. Borrow the questions for a moment here.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, Rav Chanan said over the following story. Rav Kahana Aisi Gita. Rav Kahana brought a divorce for Layadana, and he didn't know exactly if it was Misur and Nahardai from the town of Sur to Nardai. Sur, Nardai, Mechuzah. These are like the big cities in Bavel. It comes across throughout Talmud. Even Nahardai Lasura, or it was from the opposite, from Nardai to Sura. Anyway, Rav Kahana also came to Rav. He went in front of Rav. I'm late to Richna in front of Nechtam, or late to Richna. Do I need to say b'fanei nechtav or not? Amar he says to him, "Lo tzrichas." It is not necessary. Top of 6b. The avdis, but if you do it ahanis, then it's a good thing. What does this mean? My of this ahanis. What do you mean? What it means is as follows. It means that if you say b'fanei nechtav, you're not required to, because obviously there is enough frequency of travel that people can verify the signatures. But if you do, it serves as a verification. And therefore, the Asi Balma'ar, if the husband will come along and he'll claim the document as a forgery, we will not listen to him. Gittin, we learned, we're following a similar story. There was a story of a person who brought a divorce in front of Rabbi Shmuel. He says to Rabbi Shmuel, do I need to say b'fanei or not? He says to him, says, my son, where do you come from? He says, Rebbe, I come from the town of Sisai. He says to him, you do need to say b'fanei nechtav so that the document now is verified. Once the guy walked out and nichlas in front of Rabbi Loi. Presumably the guy also said b'fanei nechtav once he's in front of Rabbi Shmuel. Maybe Rabbi Shmuel was just asking a question and he actually got to go back to the court. I'm not sure. Okay, regardless, Rabbi Loi comes in. Rebbe, like Farsi, some of voice between Eretz Yisrael. He said, understand, this town of Farsi Soy is inside of Israel. It's closer to Tzipari more than Akko, which is not a Ramero or Akka Eretz Yisrael Gittin. Ramero says Akko is like Eretz Yisrael for Gittin. So for sure, Sisoy is. Farsi Soy is. Now, for the Rabbanon, they flee Gilal, the Ramero, Elab Akai. The Mirachka. This is only true of Akko, which is just far. Avak Farsi Soy, the Mekarva, Loi. However, Sisoy, which is close to Tzipari, it's certainly the case. It's part of Israel. Okay, if it's part of Israel, so then why do you require b'fanei nechtav? It's part of Israel. Hisha says if anything is part of Israel, does not need b'fanei nechtav. So he says, Amalei says to him, "Shtaik b'ni shtaik," silence. Hal v'yatsa davar b'heter yatsa. That's what I said, and that's it. And the Gemara says, what was the big secret? What was Ravi Loi's question? Rabbi Shmuel clearly explained his reasoning. He says, 1 second. He explained the reason is not because it's a requirement, but because this way she doesn't have to verify the documents. So the Gemara says, you're right, he didn't hear it. In other words, Rabbi Shmuel says, verify the document, not because you need to verify it, because it's in Israel, you don't need to verify it. Verify it just because that it'll be easier for the woman. She won't have to verify her document again. So just all you need to do is say b'fanei nechtav.
Because just because then that takes away the requirement for her to have to get it verified. So it gives her less work, right? That's
correct.
And
so typically she'd have to do a verification, which is called kiyum stars.
And so so she did the verification that you talked about, right? Before.
So if he says b'fanei nechtav, kiyum stars is not necessary.
And that's the agent, right?
The agent would make the statement of b'fanei nechtav.
And so then the agent would be the witness to say that I made this statement.
A single witness. Correct. And that's type of event that a single witness could verify. Because typically you need 2 witnesses to verify.
Right.
So here it's just easier for her to do it. So basically what happened was Rabbi Loi did not hear the whole statement of Rabbi Shmuel. He just heard Rabbi Shmuel say you have to say b'fanei nechtav. So what do you mean you have to say b'fanei nechtav? We're in Israel. So Rabbi Shmuel says just silence. And the real reason is you don't have to say it, but why not make the woman's life easier? You should say it. And therefore, what do we see from this price? So we see here that even if you're in Bavel or in Israel and you don't need to say it, you should say it because it makes everyone's lives easier. Okay.
Could have said that at the beginning of the whole.
I'm sorry?
They could have said that at the beginning of the whole.
Yeah.
Do we establish if the agent can be the signer too?
That's a machlekes. What do you mean if the agent can be a signer?
Like if I'm the agent delivering the get, it has to be a signer on the get.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So you can say, It was signed in front of me, yeah, it was, yeah.
And yeah, sure.
Because I did it, yeah.
There's another question, which is regard to how many people do you need to say b'fanei nechtav? There's 2 or 3, and that was dependent on whether
That was before, right?
whether the shliach nasa aid or not. So that would be when he brings the divorce, the agent brings the divorce and says b'fanei nechtav, you need to have 2 people present or 3 people present. And the Gemara's final explanation of this debate was whether the messenger himself serves on the court.
And so that is a no, you can't serve on the court.
So that the Gemara has this debate.
Debate.
Okay. Shalach le Rabbi Yosser Rav Chisda. Rabbi Yosser sent the following question to Rav Chisda. Gittin Habon. So this interesting fellow of Yosser. We'll soon see more about him. He asked Rav Chisda the following question: Gittin Habon mishom lakan. If a divorce comes from outside of Israel to Israel, ein tzarich leimar b'fanei nechtav u'b'fanei nechtam. I'm sorry, he notified him, he let him know in a message that if a divorce comes from outside of Israel to Israel, b'fanei nechtam is not necessary. In other words, from Bavel to Israel, you do not need to say b'fanei nechtam. The Gemara says, let's say the reason is let's say the reason is why do you need to say b'fanei nechtam? Because of Lishma, and people in Bavel know the rules of Lishma, so therefore it's not necessary. So what's the Gemara's question? So the Gemara asks, is this logical? If a haraba is to the Rava, Rabba agrees to Rava. In other words, Rabba also requires the document to be easily verified. Obviously, he also requires the document to be easily verified. However, because there are many people that move from Israel to Babylonia, so therefore there are many people available to verify the documents. Okay, so this is the statement that Rav Yosser made. Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef says, "Man leimal under Rav Yosser bar Samcha." This is like when you send in the question to Tova. It's like, is this hashgacha reliable? So you're making a statement here from Rav Yosser. You're telling me that you don't have to say b'fanei nechtav from Bavel to Israel. How do I know that Rav Yosser is reliable? I've never heard of him. And not only that, I have a reason to think that he isn't reliable. What was the terrible thing that Rav Yosser did? Can you imagine? He sent the following message to Rav Yehudah. So what happened was people would move from Bavel to Israel to study Torah for a couple of years. You can imagine it's a journey, plus studying for a while. These people basically would be separate from their wives for quite a while. So he sent to Rav Yehudah, he sent down to Bavel. He lived in Israel. He sends to Rav Yehudah in Bavel. He says, by the way, what was Rav Yehudah's opinion about moving from Bavel to Israel? Anyone knows? Osir. Osir is prohibited. We learned about it in the end of Ksubas. He holds as a positive commandment to remain in Bavel, not to go back to Israel. So much that when Rav Zera went up, Rav Zera stopped. He made sure not to see Rav Yehudah again. He's afraid Rav Yehudah would rebuke him. Obviously, the halacha is not like Rav Yehudah. Okay. Anyway, so he sends a message. You can imagine Rav Yehudah is no stranger to discouraging people from going to Israel, and he says to him, people that b'nei adam ha'olam misham lakan, people who come from Bavel to Israel, they fulfill the following verse. This is not pleasant. Vayitnu es hayalad b'zayna. They sell their sons to prostitution. The hayalda machar b'yayin, and their daughters they sell for wine. They used to, and it's they drink. Okay, what's the problem? Okay, so that was basically what he was saying, because the father is not in the home basically for a couple of years. Okay, so what was the problem? What was the problem? Because of below certain. So I'm sure all of us have gotten aliyahs to the Torah. If you look on the Torah scroll, you'll notice that every word is written on a line. That line is called certain. It's interesting that when a divorce, I mentioned to you that a divorce is written on a piece of paper. A lot of divorces today are written on paper, not on parchment. And one of the first things you need to do to put a divorce is they have a frame, like a stencil. They put it down on the paper and they do all the lines. They make searches basically. They create all these lines. So this guy Vyasa wrote a verse without certain. But Omer of Yitzchak says, Shtayim Kaisvin. If you write 2 words of a verse, that's fine. Shalosh ein kaisven. 3, if once you write 3 words, you need to do sirtut. Masnisa you need to do sirtut. You need to make a line.
Okay.
It has to be written on a line. Masnisa tano, in the price that we learned, shalosh kaisven, arba ein kaisven. You can write 3, but you can't write 4. Here he clearly wrote way more than 4. He wrote 6 words. And therefore,
What you're saying is there are certain lines you just shouldn't cross.
except if the letter is a tall letter like lamed, goes right over. Anyway, okay, 3 or 4 words you can't write. So now apparently Rav Yosser does not know this rule. So who says that Rav Yosser is a reliable person to quote a statement from that in Bavli you do not need to say b'fanei. Okay, so Abaye says to him, so let's say he didn't know the statement of Rav Yitzchak. Does that mean he's not a great rabbi? If you tell me that Rav Yitzchak was saying an argument that was dependent on reasoning, in other words, Rav Yitzchak was giving you a logical argument. So then you could argue to me, you should say if he was a big rabbi, he could have figured it out himself. That's a logical argument. However, Rav Yitzchak is not quoting a source or a logical reason. He's telling you a tradition, an accepted fact. The Gemara Lashmile, and he never heard of this tradition. Not only that, Rav Yosser Yehudah asked him Mori al Yadei. God agreed to Rav Yosser. What a statement! What's Abai talking about? So talking about the story of Pilegesh Begiva. Familiar with the story of Pilegesh Begiva?
I'm familiar with it.
Familiar? Okay, well, not familiar with the story. Okay, so go through the story quickly. Basically, there was a man who had a Pilegesh. Pilegesh is a concubine. I don't know what a concubine means, but what a Pilegesh is basically, you might say it's a legal mistress. She does not have the privileges of marriage. The relationship is legal and acceptable.
Like known in public, right?
No, it's more than just known in public. It's legal, but she doesn't have the privileges of a wife. So she doesn't have a ksuba. She doesn't have the obligations or the restrictions. I believe that a Pilegesh might not even require a divorce. I have to double check that one. I'm not 100% sure about that. Regardless, it's whatever. There is, according to some opinions, a Pilegesh is only permitted for a king. That's to be the Rambam's opinion. According to other opinions, anyone's allowed to have a Pilegesh. Regardless, a Pilegesh was banned by the early Rishonim. They prohibited any, even according to the opinions that say you're allowed to have a Pilegesh. They said you can't have a Pilegesh. There's a number of different reasons. You can look at the Ramah. I believe it's right in the beginning of Yerdea. In general, it seems not to be a good idea anyway. So, regardless, there's this fellow that had a Pilegesh. So yeah, he has a mistress, and his mistress was promiscuous, and she ran away from him. At some point, she was beaten up at night and killed. And the husband took her body. He dismembered it.
That's right.
And sent a piece to every single tribe. He lived in the tribe of Binyamin, and he said that the tribe of Binyamin is not properly pursuing the murderers behind the people that killed this woman. So the tribes are very incensed. They asked Binyamin. Binyamin said no, they're not. They didn't agree. They asked the Urim Tumim. The Urim Tumim told them to go out to war. They went out to war. First day they lost. The second day they lost. And the third day they asked the Urim Tumim if they were going to win. And then they said they asked the Urim Tumim if they were going to win. So the Urim Tumim said they would win. And they went out to war and they won. And of course, Shevet Binyamin was almost completely wiped out. There were only 600 men left. Right. And then they had to. That's the story of Tu B'Av, etc. Okay. So the reason, part of the reason.
Hey, we're not enough fun this time. Seriously, the guy who chopped up his wife, did he get in trouble for that?
That's exactly what we'll talk about.
Okay.
So the guy, it's quite clear from this Gemara and from the verses that the fellow chopped up his wife. He wasn't innocent either, to say it mildly. He was partially responsible for his wife being adulterous and not wife, his concubine, whatever that means, his Pilegesh. being adulterous, and it's not really adultery. It's important to understand. It's not. She's not a wife. She's not really bound to him. She probably shouldn't because she's a mistress, or a lover. But like, it's not the same severity.
We're also talking corpse mutilation here. We're in Saw territory. I mean, what is?
And it appears that the husband was partially responsible for her behavior and for the fact that she was at night in the middle of the night and killed. Tizna ola pilag shay. His pilagesh was this, infidelity. If Yasser says, what happened? Zvuv. Zvuv matzala. He found a fly. Rabbi Yonasan says, Nima matzala. He found a needle. And in other words, he found one of these things. We'll talk about where he found it. But he was very angry with her, and he kicked her out of the house, and that's why she went and found somebody else, and that's why she was wandering in the middle of the night, and eventually was killed. Rav Yosef found Eliyahu and Avi. What he says to Eliyahu, what's God doing? He was involved in the story of Pilagish Begiva. What was he saying? Eliyahu and Avi says he was quoting what they said in the study hall. He said the debate between Yonasan and Evyaser. Amar Leis, or Evyaser says to Eliyahu and Avi, Chas v'sholom, make us fake a kamishmaya. Does God not know what happened? Of course, God knows what happened. So it was either it was a needle or it was a fly. Amar Lei, Ela v'Ela divrei l'kim chayim. Both opinions have validity. Zvuv matzav la'hikman, nim matzav hikman. In other words, he found both a fly and a needle. And sort of the question was how to read the psukim. Do the psukim focus more? Was it more the needle or was it more the fly? Amar Yehudah, so Yehudah explains. Zvuv b'kairo. There was a fly on the plate. V'nima ba'isamakim. The needle was next, within her pubic hair, and therefore presented a threat to his. He could have wounded himself pretty badly. Okay, Zvuv misu. So Zvuv was sort of he disliked it because his food wasn't tasting good. However, the needle, was a potential severe injury. Some say they were both on the plate. Zvuv einsav v'nima p'shiusa. The fly could have been involuntary, as the fly could have flown into the food. The needle was probably the fact that she was trying to, have him bite into a needle. Okay. And for one of these reasons, the husband got very angry and threw out this mistress, and then eventually she was hanging around the wrong men who she was sleeping with, and then eventually killed her. Omer of Chisda says, Lo'olam. One second. A person should not put an extreme amount of fear in his house. The husband was so anxious, or he came down very hard on this mistress, and therefore and the result of that ended that tens of thousands of Jews were killed. One second. Yeah, to tens of thousands. Yeah. Okay. Amar of Yehudah. Amar. In other words, because he shouldn't have gone completely crazy against her for finding these things. Amar of Yehudah. Amar Rav. Yehudah says the name of Rav. If somebody puts extra fear in his house, he comes to the following three averos: Gili Arayas, promiscuity, because he's basically encouraging his wife to make out with other men, and murder, because if she runs away from the house, she puts herself at risk for to potentially be killed, like what happened with Pilagish Begiva. The Chil Shabbos and violation of Shabbos, and Rashi explains because If he's very strict, and let's say the candles weren't lit on the lit on time on Shabbos, his wife will go ahead and light the candles on Shabbos anyway. Rabbi Chana said, we learned that there were 3 things a person needs to say in his house every Erev Shabbos. Right before dark. Asartem, araftem, hedlikos hanera. Did you take off maasros from all the things that needed to be tithed? And did you make an erev? This would be either an erev for the courtyard or an erev to travel at a distance. And hedlikos hanera, did you light a fire? Well, in other words, did you light the candles? So tzarich lemimrinu b'nichusa. A person should say it gently. You shouldn't be overly anxious. So that he should be people would be able to answer, his family members will answer him honestly. If he's overly anxious about it, they might lie to him. Rashi says, I have not heard the statement, but I didn't think, this is a pretty logical thing, and therefore I fulfilled it, I thought it was logical, and I fulfilled it on my own. Okay, let's stop here.
Ashkola.
Great.